Hi, my name's Gawain.
I'm Karam.
Hi, I'm Merike.
With the government guidance flying kind of thick and fast, much of it at the last minute, we thought it might be useful to dissect some of it and have a little bit of a chat about what it really means in the classroom. So the latest government guidance has come out how many days before school opened, Karam?
What have we got? 3, 4?
3 days before schools are due to open, we've got another set of guidance out. So tell us a bit about it. What does it say?
Okay, so there were 2 documents published. There was an update to the standard DFE guidance, and there was also a brand new document called the Contain Framework. What the Contain Framework says is that in areas where intervention has already begun, there will be 4 tiers of operating within schools. When we look through, the main difference with this, it was the introduction of masks. So when we are in tier 1 in a local area, secondary schools will wear masks. When we move to tier 2, we go to blended, and when we go to tier 3, we go to key workers and vulnerable. Tier 4 is
sorry, go on.
Sorry, and then tier 4 is a lockdown where primary schools join secondary schools with key workers.
So this is about what happens as the case rates rise locally, and it's deemed there needs to be some level of intervention, some change to what's been set out for schools.
Yeah, but the main thing I've noticed is the fact that there really isn't much in the way of change for primary schools. Secondary schools go masked, blended, key worker. Primary are full opening, and then in extremis will then just shut. There's no move to blended learning.
Merike, primary schools. What does it mean for you in your school?
I mean, it doesn't really make much of a difference for us because, as Karam's just said, until you hit tier 4, there's no change whatsoever for primary or earlier settings. We're just expected to stay open regardless, no matter what, if there's a local lockdown or not. And really, I think the only reason for that would be so that we're seen as a babysitting service, so that the economy doesn't collapse and so that parents and carers can still go to work. Either that or the virus gets to a primary school door and goes, "Whoa, lads! You're secondary. You're not allowed in primary. Get the school down the road." But who knows?
So we're talking about rising case rates, but no change in primary until the most extreme level.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and that's, take into account primary schools. You tend to have the children in primary, particularly in early years, who have constantly got a runny nose, don't quite know how to blow the nose yet, like to use my sleeve as their tissue, and if they do use a tissue, they give it back to me like that, rather than going and putting it in a bin. Yet, we're the ones that are going to be staying open throughout. Even the guidance around face masks. Yeah, even the guidance around face masks doesn't apply to primary. Goodness knows if we'll get yet another U-turn. I think we're just spinning in circles now, aren't we, rather than having U-turns.
So this question of masks, because I mean, I know we've got a lot of members contacting about masks, face coverings, when they should be worn, when they shouldn't be worn, and there really is a difference of opinion here between what the government's saying, what the union's saying. What's the government saying in terms of masks at secondary level, Karam?
The government is saying that at the moment, well, that was one of the changes to the guidance, was the fact that they are now no longer banning masks outright. They're leaving it down to personal choice within secondary schools. It's only once you're in an area of local intervention where they've installed a tightening of the local lockdown issues that then masks will be compulsory within communal areas, it says. However, there is also a small little bit in the fine print saying that no, you can't force any child to wear a mask, even in a communal area.
Right, so it'll be compulsory, but without it being compulsory.
Yeah.
Okay, and primaries?
Primaries, no, it doesn't apply.
But how does that work? I mean, I know what the union guidance is. Union guidance is really, really clear, which is that it should be personal decision. Where staff want to wear masks, they should have the right to do so. And where a school group feels the wearing of masks is appropriate and they put that issue collectively. The management, the union will back them.
Yeah.
Does the government guidance say that masks are not allowed in primary school, or does it just say nothing about it?
It's more that they're just not recommending that they're used. I mean, there's arguments for and against having them in a classroom anyway. So, for example, I had a child in my class last year with hearing impairment who relied on lip reading. So if I'm wearing a mask, you wouldn't be able to do that. And it's not like the masks that have got the, clear bit in the middle of,
or something.
Yeah, are easily easy to come by. And unless I remember to put some form of dish soap on that, not so that it's bubbly, but so that it prevents it from fogging up, you still wouldn't be able to see through it anyway.
Yeah.
I
mean, there is a judgment call there, isn't there? And I think that's why the NEU hasn't said masks should be compulsory everywhere or masks shouldn't be worn everywhere. We've said it's up to professionals to make a judgment based on their risk assessment in their own setting, what they feel does the best to keep students safe.
That's it. I think also in primary, we're not having children or staff really move around the school building as much. Lunches are to be eaten in classrooms, which brings its own set of challenges.
I was saying earlier, you work at the lower end of the school, don't you? Lunch in classroom is going to be interesting.
Well, my little cherubs don't stay for lunch anyway because they're 3 and 4. So I get a new set of cherubs in the afternoon after the others have gone. However, the reception children, bless them. It's not an ideal start to school, is it, for them? But make the best of a bad situation.
Best we can do in this current situation with the pandemic, etc. But secondary schools, an awful lot more moving around. I mean, I was really surprised. One of the things I thought I would see in government guidance for secondary schools was suggestions of things like carouselling, suggestions of blocking subjects into whole half days so that you haven't got that movement around the school. But they don't seem to have made, I mean, those are the kind of recommendations that should have been made back in July. So schools had time to prepare their curriculum and timetables to fit with that, shouldn't they? But there doesn't seem to be anything of that nature, does there, in the guidance?
No, it's one of those where it's one of the vagaries that we get in a lot of this guidance, isn't it? You get the occasional suggestion, but nothing that actually lays things out and helps you plan properly.
Yeah. Whereas like some kind of exemplars, some kind of, a school could organise like this, they could do this. I mean, surely it's minimising the contact, minimising the travelling and moving around classrooms. And I know a lot of schools have already put in place measures to do that, but it's pretty shameful, I think, that they're having to do that on an ad hoc basis rather than having a set of recommendations from government that would help them.
I think one of the main issues is just a lack of collaboration. We've been talking about Plan B for months. We've written to them. We've made offers. If they'd have shown us a draft version of this guidance a couple of weeks ago, we could have just asked some really simple questions, and they could have filled those gaps in understanding, or we could have made requests, and then it could have been put out. At the moment, it's the fact that it's quite a bunker mentality going on in the DfE. They're not willing to get other people to speak to them, and I think you can really see it in this guidance.
Yeah. So I guess the onus is then on us to respond to that. Not just take the guidance and say, fine, there's guidance now, we'll roll with it, but to identify what the issues are, to raise them, to go back to the DfE, but also at a local level. If we can spot things in our schools that are not going to work or are not going to keep people safe, we need to be talking, don't we, as staff teams? We need to be getting together in a socially distanced or virtual way, but getting together, school groups, and saying, okay, what would make the place safe? Where are the holes? Where are the problems? How could we solve them? And then putting those as clear plans. And hopefully, school managements will see that as a positive process to engage around the risk assessment and improve it. But I know that the union certainly would support school groups if there's a clash between the school group and management over things which, fundamentally are about keeping people safe, not just the staff, not just the students, but the whole community safe, isn't it? Yeah.
definitely.
And that's where, if your school's got a health and safety rep, that would be an invaluable person to go and have a chat to. And if not, get in touch with your local district or branch so that somebody in the district or branch committee can come and give you a hand. Because sitting back, if you know that there's something wrong within your school and not doing about it, it's not going to help anybody.
We've got to get those collective conversations going, get people talking about it, identifying the problems and working together to solve them, rather than being concerned about it but not willing to say anything because it's not in the guidance or the government hasn't said yes to deal with it, or
because they expect a magic wand to come like that and just fix it all.
Yeah,
that's not going to happen.
No, totally.
Yes, I do have a magic wand that lives on my desk. Why wouldn't I?
Well, quite. Why wouldn't you? Nothing surprises me anymore, Merike. Seriously. But the I mean, we've seen this throughout the pandemic, haven't we? Where the government, had inadequate guidance when initially they didn't want to close schools to the majority of students, etc., etc. We've just had to step in and say what's safe, what we're going to do about it, and then enforce that. And on the whole, I think that's worked well. It's what's protected people and kept people safe. Is there any other kind of guidance on specific activities or anything? What kind of things are allowed? What kind of things are banned?
We can sing again.
Woo,
yay!
We can sing again.
My colleagues may not be thankful that I'm allowed to sing again. And in fact, anyone that's ever heard me sing karaoke, I'm sorry. And yeah, never mind. But we are allowed to sing again. The early years guidance said anyway that you're allowed to sing because they acknowledged it's good for the children. Yeah, it is. Now the rest of the guidance says that singing is now allowed. Some other research had been conducted and pardon the pun. And singing is all right. If you are singing inside, you can't have it in giant groups, so still not allowed to sing in assemblies and collective worships and stuff.
And I know a lot of schools have cancelled assemblies and are doing them in rooms,
we're doing ours via Zoom.
Ooh,
I know, get us. Yeah.
So no singing in assemblies, but we can sing in the classroom, we can...
Yeah.
Music?
So we can do that.
Wind instruments, recorders?
Well, it does mention wind instruments and brass instruments. You're not allowed to blow them in the direction of somebody else.
Oh, I thought you were saying you're not allowed to blow them. I was like, how on earth do you play?
You just told it. You just practiced the finger work, mime it. Yeah. No, you can play them, but you're not allowed to blow your instrument in the direction of another person. And if you are singing, then you're not allowed to face someone. So you have to either sit side by side or back to back with them, which will make for some interesting...
It'd be challenging to run an orchestra like that, wouldn't it, with everyone facing in different directions from each other?
It would be. Yeah.
Having conducted school orchestras and choirs in the past, I'd relish that challenge, I think, to how you keep them all in time.
Yeah, good luck with that one. I mean, I teach nursery, mine don't sing in time anyways.
So less of an issue from your perspective.
Yeah, much less of an issue.
How about your school? Oh, sorry. How about your school, Karam? Will students be singing?
As things, well, I don't think so. I think secondaries is slightly different again, isn't it? I'm not certain on the advice for singing. I think one of the reasons they've allowed singing in primary schools is a lot of the evidence that SAGE have been publishing suggests that smaller children, smaller lungs, less likely to give off viral load to the environment. Which, if we're looking at the older students, I'm not certain that singing is going to be encouraged in secondary schools.
It doesn't specify key stage.
Oh, that's interesting.
Is it not?
No.
That's very interesting. I guess another area where schools will have to make a judgment on what's safe given their own students and environment. I was intrigued, though, by the idea, because I'll be honest, the idea that singing is important, music is important. As a musician, I fundamentally agree with. But I was a little surprised with it coming out of the DFE because how shall I put this? They don't often send the signal that subjects like music do have any importance, do they?
So it certainly goes against their EBAC kind of rhetoric, doesn't it?
It does. And when you look at things like, the general response to the pandemic, that the main focus has been on trying to make sure students essentially catch up around music, catch up around subjects like maths and English, core subjects, with a focus on that rather than on that wider curriculum. I know that was what was quite controversial, I think, at the beginning of the summer, when I know the union launched a call for a broad range of support and opportunities over the summer. I think what was called the summer offer for all. And instead, the government decided to focus the funding available on a catch-up fund focused on core subjects instead.
Yeah, I mean, it does say in the guidance, and I quote, all pupils should have access to a quality arts education.
Wonderful. Let's hope that
it's only taken a global pandemic for them to admit this.
Yeah, but let's make sure that carries on beyond the end of this crisis, because it's absolutely wonderful, isn't it?
Completely.
But the catch-up fund was not so broadly focused, was it? How's that been applied in your areas? How does the money break down? What do you think will happen with the catch-up fund?
There's that many different bits of funding that's been announced. It's quite difficult actually to keep track of what's coming and when. So the guidance that was dropped on Friday night of a bank holiday weekend, thanks for that, DFE.
Impeccable timing,
Yeah, that mentions funding and catch-up funding worth £1 billion to make sure that they've got resources to help all pupils to make up for lost teaching time. 650 million to be spent on ensuring all pupils have the chance to catch up and supporting schools to rise to the challenge, and that'll be a one-off grant funding.
So that's 65% of the funding focused.
Yeah, and head teachers. So it's up to individual head teachers to decide how that money is going to be spent.
Okay, so there could be some level of school flexibility around, looking at nurture, looking at a curriculum that embraces the kind of social and emotional aspects, the art, as well as just a narrow focus.
Which would be needed. However, my concern around that is if it's going to be anything like the £8 million worth of government funding around mental health training and support that was announced a couple of weeks ago, just before the exam fiasco debacle, that money's not ring-fenced. So if a school decides that actually our budget's a little bit ropey, we're facing redundancies, etc., there's nothing actually stopping that school from using that money to plug a gap elsewhere and not using it for the reason that it's intended for.
And I'm sure no school would want to do that. And yet with the scale of school funding cuts we've seen over the last 10 years, it reminds me quite a bit of a study that was done quite early on into the use of pupil premium funding, which actually found that in the vast majority of cases, pupil premium funding had essentially been used to prop up things the school had previously been doing, but that were going to be cut because of funding cuts. So rather than introduce new innovations into the system, a lot of the money was simply being spent to try and keep schools going. And yet, it makes a nice headline, we're putting all this additional money into schools, but if you're taking it out at the same time with the other hand, it doesn't help, does it? Well, let's hope that this fund does better than that.
It's something I'll be keeping an eye on, definitely, particularly as a caseworker for the union. There are a lot of redundancy cases which were paused during the pandemic. However, we're entering a new academic year now, and if things are seen or perceived to be getting back to somewhat normal, it's likely that redundancy situations and budget cuts will be happening again. And if places do start to see an injection of cash that isn't ring-fenced, it could potentially save someone's job. So,
which it is a positive thing, but the point is the money should be there to be able to pay for.
It should be there anyway.
Already, it should be additional money. It's supposed to be additional, isn't it? I guess one to keep an eye on, and maybe one we can return to.
Well, there was Ofsted, wasn't there? There was talk of Ofsted evaluating.
No Ofsted.
No, but there was talk about Ofsted being given a slightly different role in the autumn term to check to see, and
Yeah.
that Ofsted may be coming in to check to see how people are spending
I
their catch-up money.
I heard
Um,
this, yeah.
But then you kind of think, well, have they set what the? So surely, if Ofsted are going to be coming in to check, then Ofsted must have a picture, an image of what good use of catch-up money would look like. And so, why haven't they provided that what their picture would look like for to
Well,
inspire people?
How could
well,
they
why,
have that though? Because surely it would depend on the individual school as to what those individual children in each individual school need in order to be caught up.
so this is what I was going to say. And why hasn't that conversation happened with professionals about how it could be used? So there's almost like a bit of a pattern here, isn't there? The government sets something out with very little guidance on what it should look like, very little discussion with the profession about what it could look like. And then they send in a bunch of inspectors to check that you're doing it right, when no one quite knows what right is until the inspections have started and they're being told they're doing it wrong. It's the wrong model, isn't it? You know, rather than the stick to beat people when they're doing it wrong, why not start by saying, here are some ideas of what might be right. Can we have a professional conversation about this? I mean, I heard about the Ofsted thing, and I know some people welcomed it as a different role for Ofsted. I'll be honest, I was quite cynical. I think it's a way of making sure that Ofsted gets back into schools early under whatever pretext to normalise the return of Ofsted. Because, you know, once Ofsted was paused when it started, a lot of teachers said, great, we can get on with our teaching now without it being torn apart by this, you know, inspection system that's got out of control. Maybe we don't need it back in at all. Or, you know, maybe there's a different role for HMI looking at subject inspections or something. Anyway, that's a longer conversation, I guess. But yeah, the moment you say Ofsted, I think you get the same reaction from all of us, which is there's got to be a different and a better way of doing it than involving that particular organisation. We're almost out of time, so I've got one last question for you both, which is if you had to draw out just one key point during this term, what, having read the guidance, having looked at what it means in your context, what would you say people should be looking out for?
If you think there's an issue, don't just sit on it, raise it, and then people can help you collectively to solve it.
Brilliant. Karam?
Mine is stay calm and be prepared to adapt, because these are unprecedented times, as people like to say. There will be things that we miss. There will be ways. Nobody's going to have just stumbled onto best practice right from the start. We're going to have to be constantly looking and evaluating things. And if something isn't perfect, don't worry. Just make the changes that are needed then.
Excellent. And I guess I would add to that, talk to your colleagues, work collectively as a school group, as a union group in a school, as a group of staff in a school, determine what is right and safe for your workplace, and then work together with management and with the support of the union to make sure that's the plan that's put in place. Raise the collective voice of educators. Brilliant. Thanks both for your time. Thanks to those who've watched or listened, and we'll be back again next week.
Take care.